An ex-veteran broke the seal on the Vampiresses of Station X. Now their fangs guard him at night. The lines on his face, the quickness of his reflexes, and the silence in his eyes spoke of battles fought across planets he could barely remember. When he finally left the military, he thought he could escape it all. The gunfire, the orders, the endless corridors of enemy ships. But peace was hard to find. Humans seemed to follow each other into conflicts, and Kale had learned the hard way that solitude was sometimes the only true refuge. That's why he had chosen Station X. It was not on any well-trafficked route. No colony bothered to chart its abandoned corridors. Rumors had long circulated that it was cursed, haunted by shadows and creatures that defied logic. Stories claimed that no one who ventured inside had ever returned unchanged. Kale, however, did not care for rumors. He cared for silence, space, and the ability to live without the constant press of civilization on his shoulders. The station was older than any settlement Kale had seen. Its metal walls were scratched and pitted by centuries of neglect, and the corridors carried the faint scent of rust and recycled air. Panels flickered weakly in some sections, and in others, darkness swallowed the path entirely. Kale landed his small shuttle in the central hangar, taking note of the emergency lights that still hummed faintly. They were enough for now, though he suspected repairs would take weeks. As he explored the station, Kale felt a curious energy in the air. It was subtle, like a current running just beneath the surface of reality. He had walked through many abandoned facilities, but Station X was different. The walls seemed to watch him. The floor under his boots seemed to hum with a faint vibration, as if the station itself had a heartbeat. Kale shrugged off the unease. War had taught him to ignore warning signs until they became unavoidable. Deep in the bowels of the station, Kale discovered a chamber that was unlike the others. Its entrance was sealed with a material he could not identify, a black alloy that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Across the surface, strange symbols were etched, glowing faintly in the dim light. They were alien, elegant, and ominous all at once. A plaque warned in multiple languages, human and alien alike, that the chamber must not be opened. Kale had read the warning carefully, tilting his head as he studied it. He had learned in war that warnings were often there to keep people alive or to test their curiosity. Curiosity had saved him more times than luck ever had. He examined the seal. It was cold to the touch, almost unnervingly so. When he pressed his hand against it, a faint hum resonated through his palm. Without thinking much, Kale reached for his multi-tool and began to work on the mechanism. Hours passed as he carefully pried the seal apart, testing each lock and bolt. His military training gave him patience and precision, and slowly the barrier gave way. With a final twist, the seal cracked open. The chamber inside was dark, deeper than Kale expected, and filled with artifacts that seemed to pulse with life. Shadows twisted and moved as though they were conscious, though the air was still. In the center of the room lay what remained of the so-called Vampiresses of Station X. They were skeletal, but their bones were unlike any humans. Sleek, elongated, almost serpentine in form, they were creatures of legend, told about in hushed whispers across star systems. Their skulls had large eye sockets, and their teeth, fangs, were sharp and curved. Around them, strange instruments and vials glowed faintly, humming as if waiting for someone to awaken them. Kale stepped carefully, unsure whether curiosity or caution guided him. He felt a strange pull, a sense that the chamber itself wanted him to see what had been hidden for centuries. He reached out to touch a small, metallic amulet that seemed intact amid the decay. The instant his fingers brushed it, a pulse ran through the room. The air thickened. Shadows shifted. A sound, soft and like breathing, echoed around him. Kale froze. For the first time in years, he felt fear, not of combat, not of dying, but of the unknown. His hand recoiled from the amulet, and for a moment he thought it had been a mistake. But then the room grew quiet again, the shadows still, and Kale realized nothing had attacked him. Not yet. He felt a strange respect toward the place, as if it had judged him and found him worthy, or at least interesting. That night, Kale returned to the central quarters of the station. He had rigged lights in the corridors and secured the doors, yet sleep eluded him. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every sound, metal creaking, air venting, distant hums, made him tense. He told himself he was imagining it, that the room had only been a room and the creatures within long dead. Around midnight, he heard footsteps. They were soft, deliberate, echoing faintly in the wide corridors. Kale's hand went instinctively to his sidearm, though he knew the sounds were not mechanical. The station was empty of human presence. He crept toward the source, moving silently along the walls. Then he saw them. Shadows melted into forms. The Vampiresses had awakened, not fully but enough to move. Their eyes glowed faintly, amber and liquid in the darkness. Their fangs caught the dim light of his flashlight. They did not attack. They watched him. The air between them pulsed with an energy Kale had never experienced. They were alive and somehow aware of him. Kale's first instinct was fear. He had faced alien creatures before, but these were different. They were silent, intelligent, and immense in their patience. Yet after minutes of tense standoff, nothing happened. The Vampiresses simply watched him, almost curiously, as though they were assessing him. Days passed. Kale learned that they did not follow him constantly, but seemed to linger in the shadows near the chamber he had opened. Supplies became scarce as he focused on understanding the station. He repaired lights, sealed leaks, and reactivated old life support systems. Through all this, he felt the presence of the creatures. Sometimes, when he was deep in thought, he would sense a movement out of the corner of his eye. When he turned, nothing was there, but the feeling remained. One evening, as he rested near the observation deck overlooking the stars, a gust of cold air swept through the station. The doors to the central corridor creaked open. A figure stepped through the doorway, delicate and yet terrifyingly strong. Its eyes glowed and its fangs glistened under the dim light. Kale froze, gripping his armrest. The creature spoke not in words, but in a mental voice that echoed inside his mind. "You freed us," it said. There was no anger, no plea, just a statement, calm and deliberate. "And now we watch." Kale's heart raced. He had heard of telepathy in alien species, but never with such clarity and immediacy. His mind raced with questions. Were they here to kill him? To enslave him? The creature stepped closer, tilting its head in a gesture Kale almost recognized as curiosity. "I am Kale Marston," he said aloud, unsure why. "I didn't mean to awaken you, I wanted peace." The creature paused. Its eyes seemed to pierce him, seeing through layers of memory, strategy, and instinct. Then it moved back slowly and gestured toward the corridor. Other shadows emerged, silent, graceful, and immensely powerful. Kale realized they were many, more than he had imagined, and yet they did not attack. Instead, a strange understanding settled over him. By breaking the seal, he had changed something fundamental. He did not yet know if it was good or dangerous, but he knew that the Vampiresses of Station X were no longer simply stories. They were awake. They were aware, and somehow they were bound to him. That night, as he finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, he could feel their presence, guarding the station, observing his dreams, and silently waiting for whatever would come next. Kale had left the battlefield behind, but he had found a new one, not of bullets and bombs, but of shadows, intelligence, and something far older than humanity itself. And somehow he felt that his skill, his courage, and his resilience would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. When the first rays of light, or what passed for light in the void, filtered into Station X, Kale awoke to the realization that his life had changed forever. The station was no longer just a refuge. It had become a home, a fortress, and a bond with creatures that defied everything he knew. Kale Marston, ex-veteran, had come seeking peace. And he had found guardians in the most unexpected form. The fangs and shadows of the Vampiresses of Station X, the frontier was quiet, but Kale knew it would not stay that way. The awakening had begun and he was at the center of it. Kale had always believed that solitude was simple. It was just him, his thoughts, and the quiet of space. But Station X had quickly proven him wrong. The shadows that moved in the corners of his vision, the faint hum of unseen energy, and the feeling of being watched had become constant companions. At first, he thought he imagined it, the stress of years in combat playing tricks on him. But the night revealed the truth. The Vampiresses were awake and they were aware of him. The first night after the awakening, Kale had felt fear. The next day, curiosity. By the second night, he realized something remarkable. They were guarding him. Not aggressively, not like predators stalking prey, but vigilantly. He noticed it in small ways. Supplies he had left unsecured were untouched. The corridor leading to the reactor room, which had previously groaned and rattled in the slightest breeze, remained stable. And whenever he moved through the station, shadows seemed to shift, guiding him, clearing the path. Kale tested this instinct cautiously. He left a tool near the edge of the dark corridor and watched from a distance. Within minutes, a shadow slithered silently from the chamber where he had awakened them, scooped the tool up, and returned it to the workbench as though it had always belonged there. The precision amazed him. He had worked with soldiers, androids, and even combat drones, but nothing moved with such elegance and awareness. He began to speak to them aloud, though he knew they might not understand. "I'm not your enemy, I'm just alone here." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from the corner of his eye, he caught movement. One of them, taller than he remembered, stepped out from the shadows. Its amber eyes reflected his flashlight's beam, and the faint curve of its fangs was visible even in the low light. The creature did not attack. Instead, it tilted its head, a motion so human that Cale felt a chill. The following days became a delicate rhythm of exploration and observation. Cale moved carefully through the station, repairing panels and reconnecting power conduits, while the Vampiresses watched from the shadows. Sometimes he felt their presence beside him, guiding his hand or nudging him away from dangers he could not see. He began to trust it, though the station remained eerie. The floors were uneven, machinery was unstable, and debris from centuries of neglect littered the corridors. Without their silent guidance, a minor misstep could have been disastrous. Cale started to learn more about them. Each night, he would venture further from the central chamber, and they would follow, appearing at key moments. Once, a weak section of the ceiling groaned under pressure. Cale froze, and before he could react, one of the shadows lunged, pressing against a beam in a way that held it steady just long enough for him to step back safely. Another time, a storage crate teetered near the edge of a shaft, and a pair of fanged figures stabilized it with incredible strength. He realized they were not just passive watchers, they were protectors. It was during these nights that Cale discovered something even stranger. He began to sense them not just with his eyes or ears, but with his mind. Thoughts and emotions, faint but undeniable, reached him when he was still and focused. They were not communicating with words, but with feelings, caution, curiosity, even something like loyalty. Cale could not explain it scientifically, but he accepted it. The Vampiresses were intelligent, aware, and somehow bound to him by the seal he had broken. Curiosity drove Cale further. He returned to the chamber where he had first found them. The artifacts, the vials, and the skeletal remains were now pulsating faintly, as if responding to his presence. He carefully studied the alien symbols, trying to understand the mechanism of the seal and the nature of the bond. Hours turned into days. He made sketches, notes, and diagrams, but the alien language eluded him. Yet the more he observed, the more he realized that the Vampiresses were capable of far more than raw strength. They were strategic, calculating, and disciplined. One evening, as Cale worked near the observation deck, he heard the unmistakable hum of a malfunctioning drone. Corporate salvage drones were common in abandoned sectors, often sent to recover valuable technology. But this one was different. It was active, aggressive, and malfunctioning. It detected his presence and moved to attack. Cale drew his sidearm, but before he could act, shadows erupted from the dark corners of the deck. The Vampiresses moved faster than his eyes could follow, knocking the drone aside, disabling its circuits, and pinning it harmlessly to the floor. Cale stared, astonished. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and almost elegant. They had saved him without a single command, without him needing to fight. That night, Cale finally allowed himself to rest in their presence. He sat in the control room, drinking synthetic coffee, and felt a sense of safety he had not known in years. The Vampiresses stood at intervals around the room, shadows coiling around their forms, fangs glinting faintly. He realized that he was not alone in the station anymore. For the first time, solitude had companions, not human, not fully alien, but loyal and protective. Over the next weeks, Cale began to establish routines. He repaired the life support systems, restored the water filtration, and mapped the station's hidden corridors. The Vampiresses moved silently alongside him, guarding him from unseen hazards, unstable floors, collapsing ceilings, and malfunctioning systems. Cale began to rely on them instinctively. When he climbed ladders, he sensed them below, ready to catch him if he fell. When he carried heavy equipment, he felt the subtle pressure of a shadow assisting. It was as if they had become extensions of his own senses. He also experimented with communication. Speaking aloud had limited effect, but concentrating on the subtle mental impressions he received allowed him to convey intent. He practiced slowly: stay, follow, protect. Each thought seemed to ripple through the station until a shadow responded appropriately. It was not perfect, but it was enough. Over time, Kale realized that the bond was growing stronger. The Vampiresses did not merely follow him, they understood him. Despite their loyalty, Kale remained cautious. He remembered the stories of their kind, predators that could turn on any who disrespected them. He never tested their limits aggressively, but he learned to respect their instincts and movements. In return, they seemed to trust him. The station became a shared space, one where human and alien coexisted in an unspoken agreement. Kale maintained the station, repaired what he could, and in exchange, the Vampiresses guarded him, patrolled the corridors, and ensured his survival. One morning, Kale awoke to a strange sight. A shadow hovered near the chamber where he had first found them. Its form was more defined than ever, muscular yet elegant, its fangs visible even in the pale light filtering through the station. Kale felt a surge of emotion. Was it greeting him, acknowledging his progress, or simply observing? He reached out instinctively, and for a brief moment, the shadow seemed to mirror his motion, tilting its head as though in recognition. It was subtle, but Kale understood. They were learning him as he was learning them. This growing bond gave Kale purpose. He had come to Station X seeking peace, yet he had found something far more remarkable. He was no longer a veteran seeking solitude. He was a leader, a guardian in his own right, sharing the station with beings capable of strength, intelligence, and loyalty beyond human comprehension. The sense of companionship was unlike anything he had experienced in his years of war or isolation. Kale's understanding deepened further when he discovered another function of the Vampiresses. One night, he accidentally triggered a security panel that sent an electrical charge across the floor. He froze, knowing a shock could incapacitate him. Before he could move, a shadow shot out from the darkness, absorbing the electrical arc and dissipating it harmlessly. Kale realized then that their abilities were not just physical. They could interact with energy, sense danger, and act preemptively to protect him. By the end of the month, Station X was transformed. Lights flickered steadily along the main corridors, old machinery hummed to life, and debris was cleared from the primary walkways. Kale could move confidently, knowing the Vampiresses were watching, guarding, and even guiding him. He began to refer to them quietly as the Night Wardens, a name that fit their silent vigilance. They did not respond to the name aloud, but he felt it accepted in some unspoken way. The most astonishing moment came when Kale realized he was beginning to anticipate their movements, and they were anticipating his. When he lifted a crate, a shadow would move to assist. When he climbed a ladder, one would position itself below. When he paused at a junction, they would spread to cover all possible approaches. Together, they formed a seamless partnership. Kale sat on the observation deck one night, staring out at the void of space. He felt the presence of the Night Wardens behind him, fangs glinting faintly, shadows stretching in the dim light. For the first time in years, he felt a deep sense of peace, not the kind born of isolation, but of connection. He was no longer alone. Station X was no longer abandoned, and the creatures he had awakened were no longer mere legends, they were guardians. In the darkness of the station, Kale Marston, ex-veteran and explorer, finally understood something he had never known during all his years of war. Strength was not just in fighting. It was in trust, in loyalty, and in the courage to awaken what had long been dormant and to forge an alliance with it. And in this new life, with the Night Wardens silently guarding him, Kale knew he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Kale had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of Station X. The Night Wardens, as he had come to call them, moved with silent grace through the corridors, always watching, always protecting. The station, once a decaying relic, now hummed with activity, and for the first time in years, Kale felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. But peace in the frontier was always fragile, and Station X was about to prove it. It began with a faint signal, almost imperceptible against the hum of the station's systems. Kale detected it while running diagnostics on the communications array. The signal was old, encoded in a corporate protocol he had not seen in years, and it contained coordinates for Station X along with a warning. High-value alien technology detected. Authorized salvage team en route. Kale's heart sank. He knew exactly what that meant. Corporate mercenaries, well-trained, ruthless, and heavily armed, were on their way. They did not care about legends, shadows, or the station's history. They only cared about what could be exploited and sold. Kale glanced at the corridors, at the dim shadows where the night wardens lingered, and realized the battle ahead would not be simple. He spent the next hours preparing. The wardens moved silently beside him, anticipating his needs. Kale barricaded entry points, repaired security doors, and repurposed old machinery into traps. He rigged the station's corridors with makeshift alarms and automated defenses. All the while, he studied the wardens, learning how they moved, how they sensed danger, and how they could complement his own strategies. When the first patrol ships appeared in the outer sector, Kale felt the tension tighten like a wire in his chest. They were fast, small, and armed with pulse rifles capable of cutting through reinforced steel. Kale watched from the observation deck as the ships descended, scanning the station for life signs. He knew the wardens would act only when necessary, conserving their strength and using the station's layout to their advantage. The first confrontation occurred when a landing shuttle touched down near the central hangar. Kale was ready. He and the wardens moved silently through the corridors, shadows blending with shadows, light reflecting off the fangs of the creatures in subtle glimmers. As the mercenaries disembarked, they were greeted not by empty halls, but by a living, breathing defense they could not understand. The wardens struck first. Shadows detached from walls and ceilings, moving faster than the eye could follow. One mercenary barely had time to raise a rifle before a warden slammed into him, disarming him with a single fluid motion. Another attempted to flee down a corridor, only to find a second warden waiting silently, cutting off escape. Kale marveled at their precision. Every move was calculated, every strike strategic. This was not blind aggression. It was disciplined, controlled, and terrifyingly effective. Kale directed from behind cover, using the station's intercom to mislead the intruders. He shouted false alarms, guided their attention to dead ends, and drew them deeper into corridors lined with traps he had set. The wardens responded instinctively, moving as extensions of his will without needing direct commands. He realized that the bond they shared was more than protection. It was teamwork, an unspoken synchronization of human cunning and alien power. The battle moved to the station's lower levels. The mercenaries attempted to gain control of the reactor room, a critical point that could provide them with energy to power their equipment and disable defenses. Kale anticipated this and laid a trap, a series of unstable maintenance platforms connected by narrow walkways. As the intruders stepped forward, the platforms wobbled. One of the wardens lurched forward, steadying a collapsing walkway just long enough for Kale to reposition another barrier. The mercenaries, unfamiliar with the station's treacherous architecture, stumbled, losing coordination. It became clear to Kale that the wardens were not merely protectors, they were tacticians. They flanked, distracted, and immobilized intruders without causing unnecessary harm. One particularly aggressive mercenary charged at Kale directly. In seconds, a warden intercepted him, twisting his momentum and disarming him in a way that was almost graceful. Kale had never seen such precision outside of advanced combat simulations, and he realized he had underestimated the depth of their abilities. Hours passed. The intruders regrouped, attempting to use grenades and energy pulses to flush out the shadows. Kale countered with rerouted power to doorways, short-circuiting systems to create smoke and confusion. The wardens adapted instantly, moving through debris, leaping from walls, and using the environment to their advantage. Kale felt an unusual sense of awe. The creatures he had awakened were not monsters. They were allies, protectors, and warriors whose loyalty was absolute. At one point, Kale noticed a young mercenary attempting to hide in a maintenance shaft. He paused, conflicted. The mercenary was armed and dangerous, but also vulnerable. Before he could act, a warden appeared beside him. It did not attack. Instead, it blocked the shaft, guiding the intruder out unharmed, using only its presence to assert control. Kale understood then that the wardens had their own sense of ethics. They would protect him, but they did not kill indiscriminately. The climax of the battle occurred near the station's communications hub. The mercenary team's leader, a tall, heavily armored figure, tried to access the mainframe to call reinforcements. Kale, moving quickly, blocked the door, while a pair of wardens flanked the leader. Shadows shifted with unnatural speed. One warden leapt onto the wall above, dropping silently behind the intruder, while the other moved from the side, pinning him in a corridor that seemed impossibly narrow. The leader struggled, but the wardens were too precise, too coordinated. Within moments he was subdued, disarmed, and rendered incapable of further threat. By the time the last mercenary retreated, the station was silent again. Kale, breathing heavily, surveyed the aftermath. Equipment was damaged, corridors were scattered with debris, but no lives had been lost unnecessarily. The wardens returned to the shadows, their amber eyes reflecting the faint light, and Kale realized something profound. He had not simply survived an attack. He had led a coordinated defense with alien allies, something no human force alone could have achieved. The following day, Kale assessed the station's damage. He repaired broken panels and rerouted power to critical areas while the wardens patrolled silently. He noticed subtle changes in their behavior. They were more confident, more attuned to his movements, and he sensed a deeper understanding in their presence. It was as if they had learned from the battle as much as he had. Kale also reflected on the human element. The mercenaries were not evil. They were simply following orders, trained to prioritize profit over ethics. But his alliance with the wardens had shown him a new way forward. Humans alone might have been defeated, but humans working with intelligent, loyal allies could achieve extraordinary outcomes. It was a lesson that resonated deeply with him. In the weeks that followed, Kale focused on fortifying Station X further. He repaired old communication arrays, reactivated secondary power generators, and created safe zones throughout the station. The wardens assisted silently, their movements now predictable enough for him to coordinate with them without words. Together, they established a rhythm. Kale maintained the station, and the wardens ensured its safety. Kale also began to consider the future. The attack had proven that Station X, with its hidden technology and alien guardians, could become a strategic asset. But it was not just about power. It was about responsibility. He could not allow reckless humans to exploit the station or harm the wardens. He needed to create a balance, a system where knowledge and guardianship coexisted without destruction. One evening, as Kale worked near the observation deck, he felt the familiar pulse of presence behind him. The wardens were there, shadows blending seamlessly with the station's dim light. He reached out mentally, a subtle test of their bond. The response was instantaneous, a wave of acknowledgement that filled his mind. They were not just protectors, they were partners. Kale understood that the station had become a living entity in a sense. Its corridors, machinery, and shadows were intertwined with the warden's consciousness. Together, they formed a network of vigilance, observation, and defense that could adapt to any threat. The realization was humbling. Humans alone were capable of innovation, but when combined with beings of alien intelligence, the frontier became a place of possibility rather than fear. By the end of the month, Kale had established routines. Patrols, maintenance, research, and observation created a sense of order in the once-abandoned station. The wardens moved in perfect synchrony with him, responding to subtle signals, guarding the corridors, and even anticipating problems before they occurred. Kale had found a rare harmony, human ingenuity coupled with alien instinct. One night, as he gazed at the stars, Kale reflected on how far he had come. He had arrived seeking peace, expecting solitude, and found instead an alliance that transcended species. The wardens had shown him that strength was not only in combat or survival, it was in trust, loyalty, and the willingness to awaken potential long dormant. He felt a profound gratitude for the bond they shared. Kale knew that threats would come again. The frontier was vast, and rumors of alien technology traveled quickly. But for the first time, he felt ready. Station X was no longer a forgotten relic. It was a fortress, a home, and a symbol of what humans could achieve when they respected, understood, and allied with life beyond their own. And the Night Wardens. They were ready as well, silent and vigilant, fangs glinting in the dim light, guardians of a human who had dared to break a seal and awaken not monsters, but allies. Kale Marston stood on the observation deck of Station X, gazing out into the endless expanse of space. The stars stretched like scattered diamonds across the black void, serene and eternal. But Station X was no longer empty, no longer abandoned. It hummed with activity, life, and purpose. For the first time in years, Kale felt that the chaos of the universe could be managed, not by fighting alone, but by forging bonds that transcended species and understanding. Since the attack by the mercenary team, Kale had spent countless hours repairing, fortifying, and reorganizing the station. He had transformed it from a relic of neglect into a functioning hub of knowledge, security, and survival. The night wardens, the vampiresses he had awakened, had become his silent partners in every task. Their presence was no longer eerie but comforting. Each shadow that moved in the corridors was a reminder that he was not alone, that Station X was alive, and that together they were stronger than any threat the frontier could present. The first task Kale took on was the station's communications array. It had been dormant for decades, but he believed it could be revived to send safe signals, warnings, and invitations to those who respected the frontier. The wardens hovered nearby, their amber eyes scanning the dark corners, reacting instantly to every flicker, every noise. When Kale rerouted power to the array, one of them touched a panel with a claw, stabilizing the fragile circuitry. The subtle interaction spoke volumes. The wardens were not just observers, they were collaborators. Over time, Kale began recording notes and observations about the station, its systems, and the wardens themselves. The creatures were extraordinary. They could move faster than any human reflex, sense energy fluctuations, and even manipulate minor electrical currents. But it was their intelligence, their strategic awareness, and their loyalty that amazed him most. They understood not just danger, but ethics. They protected him without harming unnecessarily, a balance of power and morality that humans often struggled to achieve. News from nearby colonies slowly reached Kale through repaired networks. Traders, explorers, and researchers had heard rumors of a strange station on the edge of civilized space, one where shadows moved with intent and life, thrived in the abandoned hull of a forgotten outpost. Some were curious, some skeptical, and some cautious. Kale realized that Station X could serve as a beacon, a place of knowledge, safety, and sanctuary for those who approached with respect rather than greed. When visitors first arrived, Kale was tense. He had grown used to solitude and the night warden's silent guidance, but human contact was unpredictable. A small scout ship docked, carrying a team of scientists and engineers. They were cautious, scanning the station for signs of danger. Kale introduced himself carefully, explaining the station's history, the awakening of the Vampiresses, and the purpose of their bond. The visitors were astonished, skeptical at first, but they quickly realized the wardens were real. Shadows moved with perfect coordination, protecting Kale while allowing the humans to explore safely. The visitors asked questions, curious about the technology, the station's architecture, and the nature of the wardens. Kale explained what he could: the seals, the ancient chamber, and the bond that now linked him to these alien beings. The wardens themselves remained in the background, observing, ensuring safety, but never interfering unnecessarily. Kale realized that trust had to be earned. The humans were learning, slowly, to respect what they could not fully understand. As the weeks passed, Kale worked tirelessly to expand the station's functions. He repaired laboratories, brought dormant systems online, and created observation decks to monitor nearby sectors. The wardens continued to patrol silently, and Kale discovered new abilities in them. They could sense approaching ships long before sensors detected them, move through spaces too small for human bodies, and coordinate defense strategies with an almost prescient awareness. One afternoon, Kale found a damaged research drone in the lower corridors. The wardens, sensing his curiosity, helped him lift it onto a maintenance table. Using their precise movements, he was able to repair its systems and bring it back online. The drone now served as a reconnaissance unit, extending their surveillance capabilities without putting any human in danger. Kale felt a quiet satisfaction. The station was becoming more than a refuge. It was evolving into a well-defended hub, capable of protecting life and knowledge in a sector where danger lurked at every turn. The true test came when an old signal appeared on the communications array, faint but unmistakable. A small fleet, independent of the previous mercenary group, was heading towards Station X. Kale did not panic. He had learned from past encounters. The wardens moved with purpose, shadows stretching across corridors, positioning themselves strategically. Kale reviewed his defenses, activating traps, reinforcing barriers, and preparing for potential combat. But this time he felt a sense of calm. He was not alone. When the fleet arrived, they attempted to breach the station, expecting an empty, abandoned shell. Instead, they encountered coordinated resistance. Doors slammed, corridors shifted, and the shadows moved with uncanny speed. The wardens acted instantly, immobilizing intruders without causing lasting harm. Kale directed operations from the observation deck, issuing commands through careful signals. The attackers quickly realized that they were facing not just one human, but a network of protection, intelligence, and strategy. By the end of the encounter, the fleet retreated, unable to breach the station. Kale surveyed the aftermath. No lives were lost unnecessarily, and the wardens had performed flawlessly. It was a testament to the unique partnership he had forged. He realized then that Station X was no longer just a home. It was a symbol. It represented what humanity could achieve when courage, intelligence, and collaboration extended beyond species boundaries. In the quiet that followed, Kale reflected on his journey. He had come to Station X seeking peace, expecting solitude, and had found something extraordinary: allies, guardians, and a purpose greater than survival. He walked through the corridors, noting subtle changes. The wardens moved with confidence, understanding the station as he did. Together, they had transformed decay into vitality, abandonment into security, and fear into trust. Kale also began to plan for the future. He realized that knowledge was just as important as defense. Station X contained relics, technology, and insights from civilizations long gone. Protecting this knowledge was vital. He established protocols for visitors, ensuring that only those with respect and understanding could access the station. The wardens, ever vigilant, enforced these rules, guiding, warning, and protecting as needed. One evening, Kale stood alone in the central chamber, the place where he had first broken the seal. The artifacts and remnants of the Vampiresses glowed faintly, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had begun there. He reached out, touching the amulet that had first awakened them. The wardens appeared silently behind him, shadows stretching across the floor, fangs glinting in the dim light. He felt a wave of connection, a reassurance that the bond was enduring, unbreakable, and reciprocal. The station had changed him. He was no longer the solitary ex-veteran who arrived seeking refuge. He was a leader, a protector, and a partner to beings of incredible power and intelligence. Together, they had turned a forgotten outpost into a thriving hub of life, knowledge, and safety. And Kale understood that this was only the beginning. The frontier was vast, and the universe was full of unknowns. But with courage, loyalty, and alliances forged across the boundaries of species, anything was possible. The stars outside Station X continued to shine, distant yet constant. Kale walked through the halls, listening to the soft hum of the station, the subtle movements of the wardens, and the faint signals of communication reaching nearby colonies. He felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had turned fear into trust, isolation into companionship, and a decaying station into a beacon of hope. As night fell, Kale settled on the observation deck, the wardens standing sentinel around him. Their amber eyes reflected starlight, their shadows blending seamlessly with the station's dim corridors. He reached out in thought, feeling their presence respond instantly. They were more than guardians, they were partners, allies, and friends. The frontier would always be dangerous, but for the first time, Kale felt that danger could be met with strength, strategy, and unity. Station X was no longer a forgotten relic. It was a fortress, a home, and a symbol of what could be achieved when humans embraced courage, intelligence, and the unknown. Kale Marston, once an ex-veteran seeking only peace, now stood at the center of something greater. A station alive with purpose, guarded by beings of incredible power, and a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity. In the silence of space, Kale smiled faintly. The frontier was vast, and adventure awaited, but he was ready. With the night wardens at his side, there was no threat he could not face, no mystery he could not explore, and no challenge he could not meet. Humanity, intelligence, and courage had forged an alliance that would endure, and Station X would stand as proof for generations to come.